Hello, and welcome to Season 2 of Mountain Laurels. I hope y'all had a good and bountiful summer. My summer was busy. I made lots of pickles, sausage soups, and jellies. I did a little swimming, and I somehow managed to break the world record for mosquito bites. At least, that's what I can only assume. In my off time, I also started a Substack, which you can find at mountainlaurels.substack.com. I'm excited to use it to interact a little more with you, listener, and hear your thoughts on the people and conversations featured on this podcast. I also received a grant from the Kentucky Foundation for Women to help produce this season. I'm honored to be a recipient, and I'm excited to use this funding to produce new episodes. I also spent a lot of my summer reading books, and one book I was able to read was The Nature of Pain by Mandi Sheffel Fugate, which I'll be talking about with Mandi on today's episode. The Nature of Pain is Mandi's memoir about her story of addiction and recovery from Oxycontin at the height of the opioid epidemic in eastern Kentucky in the early 2000s. In this episode, Mandi and I talk about her life in active addiction, what got her into treatment, the work she does now, and what it's like to be in recovery for 20 years. If you haven't picked up her book yet, no worries. There's no huge spoilers in this episode, but she does read a couple of passages from the book. And before we get started, I do want to note that we talk about substance use, self-harm, grief, and homicide in this episode, so you may not want to listen to this with kids in the car. And here's my conversation with Mandi. So you're our first repeat guest.
Yeah, I am.
So
Yeah, I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
If you just want to go right into it, we can.
Let's jump into it. Yeah.
So, Mandi, you have written a book.
I have. It's happening.
And I want to talk to you about the process of writing this book as well as the book. And the reason I want to talk to you about the process is because I am someone that hates talking about myself. And you talk about yourself in a book, so it's written down for everybody to read and consume. And also it's some pretty, it's deeply personal stuff. So I do wonder, first you can talk a little bit about what the book's about, but also I want to know what it was like writing about some of the things in here because it is so personal.
Yeah, so I think to talk about how it came about will give a whole lot of a context to what it's about.
Yeah.
Because when I first started writing, it wasn't a book. And I think that's where a lot of the freedom came from in what you see is that I was processing grief. I mean, I was writing my way through grief. And after the murder of my first cousin, who was basically my sibling, to call him a first cousin seems to almost sell that relationship short. But, in typical Appalachian fashion, I think cousins are more like siblings than they are cousins. And so we were little, I guess a year and a half apart, and were raised like brother and sister. So I had struggled with addiction for years and was clean at the time of his murder. So there was a lot to reconcile there because he had struggled to stop using, and our relationship was in a different place than what it had been when we were kids or even in our 20s. And so, I was grappling with feeling like I was having some survivor's guilt, maybe, I guess, what I know now as possibly survivor's guilt. And just kind of wrestling with maybe I didn't do enough or should I have been there. And, he was murdered while still in active addiction. So I was sorting through a whole lot of emotions where that was concerned and having all these flashbacks of things that we did when we were kids and memories that I had and this fear that I was going to forget them. And so I would write them down because I thought if I get this on paper, then it's there. And I had this, I don't know if it's irrational. Maybe it's something that when you lose someone, everybody goes through this. And I would just like things that would trigger memories, songs, scents, driving through my hometown. Like it was like everything was haunting me in a way. And that everything reminded me of him and something that we had done. And so I started writing all that stuff down. And that was the beginnings of this. And that was in 2013. So that was the beginnings of what's here. After going to the Appalachian Writers Workshop, I figured out that this was a book. I don't know. I hadn't planned it to be.
Yeah.
And so then I started going deeper into my own personal story because it became more about, I won't say it's all not more about me, but I shaped the narrative a little bit and was like, I just want to talk about Eric. Like I was hell bent on this is a book about Eric. This is a book about our relationship. But to understand that, you had to understand who I was and where I came from. And so then what ends up in the nature of pain is my journey and not just solely focused on him and our relationship.
Yeah, that while reading the book, I know you, so I knew you were writing a book when you were writing and working on this book. And I did, just knowing your story, I thought it was interesting. Like, it's so much a book about, or it's much more a book about you, but also, I think you kind of really hitting on that, like, this is like a sibling. So it's like, Eric was such a huge part of you. I think this passage, Saturday nights and Sunday mornings, if you want to read that, because it does like sort of describe how that relationship felt more like siblings and maybe like why your experience felt more like you were so close like siblings.
Sure. This is Saturday nights and Sunday mornings, 1994. Waking up at Eric's house on Sunday morning, the sun would already be high in the air, the heat beginning to rise, light streaking through the windows and burning off the particles suspended in the air. All of Saturday night was beginning to fade. Bonnie Raitt playing loud and clean on the stereo. My Aunt Jenny would be cooking breakfast. Most of the time she was making fried eggs. I preferred my eggs scrambled, but I never got the impression I had a choice. The doors were open and the fresh air filtered in. She would be busy cleaning the house. Mixtures of stale smoke and pine sol swirled through the air. I would feel energized and safe. Everything in its place. Standing in the doorway, the warm sunshine on my bare feet, heating my entire body. Daddy would be in the driveway tinkering with his truck, a black Jeep truck that was a legend among the cast of characters surrounding us. He was always tinkering with things. Nothing seemed to suit his standards. There was always room for improvement. But in the bright light of summer, everything seemed possible. Just 12 hours earlier, the house was lit up, cars packed in the driveway, everybody from up and down the creek converging here at the trailer beside the road. As many people that packed in here on Saturday night and as many chemicals as they ingested, nobody ever got mad and nobody ever got sad. This was the happiest bunch of damn drunks I would ever see. It gave me a false sense of safety about house parties and a fantasy of what they would consist of. Most of the time, Eric and I would go to bed before things broke up. We would sleep in Eric's room, black metal tube bunk beds, a stereo, a chest of drawers, and sometimes a TV. There wasn't much room for anything else, but something about the smallness made it feel cozy and secure. We would lie there and listen to them talk and sing over top the music. Vibrations from the dancing shook the whole house. The lights flickered when Hearts for Sale played, the song that got a hold of my daddy, and he would spin the chandelier in the kitchen, causing it to short out. Eventually we slept, and in the morning, everybody would be gone. As we got older, we were the ones up all night, vibrating the floor, singing over the music. It was our friends who crowded the driveway, who ganged up on Saturday night, still at my Aunt Jenny's, still with my dad, still with the chemical companions. And it seems like we woke up one day and everybody was gone. We had our last party, and we all went our separate ways. I don't remember telling anybody bye or how much that all meant to me. One day it just stopped.
So this like description of what I would consider chaos.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting to me that it like you describe it as like cozy and it felt safe. And I think that like that is kind of a testament to this relationship that you had with Eric and the association with that place. It's like you guys had such a bond that it was like you're in it together and like there's some safety in that.
Yeah. And yeah, that's accurate. And for the most part, we were the only kids at these parties. I mean, occasionally somebody would come through that maybe had a kid, but I mean, it was just us, and we were just left to our own devices. Like the adults were doing their thing, and we were just bystanders. Like we got a front row seat to watch all this go down, and there was a bond in that. And I mean, obviously we weren't aware of it at this point. I'm like, 13, I guess. And we weren't aware of it then, but I can see it now, how that bonded us. And this was probably not typical of what the other 13-year-olds were doing. And so, and it's something that we didn't talk about outside of each other, I guess. Like we probably weren't going, I mean, I know I wasn't going to school and talking about, these parties that my dad was having or my Aunt Jenny on the weekends like that. I just didn't talk about that stuff. So I think that's something we shared together, and there was a comfort in it. I mean, because they were happy. They were happy drunks. Like there was no fighting. There was no violence. Like that's not a part of my story. And I think a lot of people who grew up with alcoholic parents often experience that, but that's not my experience at all. Like we, Eric and I were having a big time. I mean, everybody was happy, and it was, it's fond when I look back on it. But in this piece, I think, I hope that you can sense that it was also a turning point. Like we're kind of at a turning point here because I'm 13, and for all the times we can swear that we're not going to drink and we're not going to smoke and we could also see the fault in what they were doing, and that we were not going to do that. And at a certain point, of course, we turn that corner and we do end up experimenting with drugs and alcohol. So
to go back though, like even further, you talk about like the first early years of your life that you probably don't really have that many memories of, but like your parents got divorced within a year or 2 years of you being born.
Yeah.
And Eric also,
he didn't know his father.
Yeah, he didn't know his father.
Yeah.
That's right. So you had sort of this similarity too of like, well, I mean, your dad would be at these parties and stuff, but it's also like, in a lot of ways, my impression from the book is like both your parents were present in your life, but like you were primarily with your mom. It was very, yeah. So I think you both had that experience, and there's a comfort in that too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we were both only children, both being raised in single parent homes. And I felt like most times that we shared my dad, because I think my dad stepped in and did things for Eric that he felt like as a boy, that there were things that he needed to know, and he didn't have a dad to teach him those things. So I think my dad stepped into that role for him in a lot of ways that he didn't even for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a bonding there in, even though I had both my parents, it was odd because my dad just felt like he never knew what to do with me.
Yeah.
When I would go there on the weekends. And so he would take me to my Aunt Jenny's because he knew I wanted to be with Eric.
Right.
And so it was like, I really was going to my dad's because I wanted to see Eric. Like I wasn't really spending time with my dad. It's because I wanted to spend time with Eric. And so, yeah, I think there was this, bond of growing up in the same situations.
Yeah. So much so it's like you didn't even have to talk about it. It was just like an understanding.
Yeah, we didn't. We didn't. And I think that's also, I mean, who really is having those kind of conversations at that age? And I think that's part of my grief process now is like, being in my 40s, I think probably these are conversations we would have now because my dad's gone. His mom, my Aunt Jenny, has passed. Like, a large amount of the people that I write about in this book are gone.
Yeah.
Like, they have passed. And that's a hard thing to sit with, being what feels like the sole survivor, and not being able to access a time and a place. Like, what's in this book is gone. I cannot access it in any way. There's no people to talk to really about it. And the physical places are gone. Like, this trailer that I'm writing about in this particular piece is gone. And so it's a whole part of my life that I cannot access physically, or like in a nostalgia way with somebody. So I think these are probably conversations we would have now if he was still here.
Yeah.
Of like a reflection type. Because no, it's definitely not anything I never felt like I had to.
Right.
To delve that deep into things with him. Like, there was this connection between us where there was just an understanding.
Right. And I mean, you were following this similar path when you were younger. And then, of course, you go away to college, and you had
many times attempted to go to college.
Because college really felt like the turning point as I was reading this, of like, this is when you were sort of, I remember when I was going to college, and my dad would always be like, well, this is the first time you're going to be on your own, and don't get arrested. And if you do, don't call me, And I thought, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
And then you get there, and it can very quickly turn into parties every weekend, or I knew people that would party during the weekdays, which was,
yeah.
It was just oh, there are no adults. It's your first time experiencing that. And it felt like that was really the turning point for you, when it became, maybe you started to recognize that it was becoming a problem.
I'm trying to think if there was a point where I was like, this is a problem. Yeah. And I didn't even have a ton of adult oversight even when I was living at home, even in high school, because I had always been this just a really good student and really responsible. Looking back, I probably had to be. Looking back now, I'm like, oh, it's because my mom was 19 when she had me. I was definitely being raised by children, and so there was a level of responsibility that I just had. And always had. And so I think nobody worried about me. They were like, oh, yeah, well, Mandi's going to be fine. And so I think there was even a level of freedom then. But, yeah, that really ramped up because I wanted to do good. And so even if I was smoke a joint and go home in high school, there was still this, I'd have to hide it from my mom. There was still this level of I don't want her to know I'm stoned right now.
Yeah.
And so then when you go to college, all that's taken away.
Right.
There really is no supervision at that point. There is nobody, giving you the once over when you get home. Mm-hmm. And so, my using went to another level when I got into college. And then it became apparent to everyone else because it was a lot harder to, I'm trying to think of how I want to say it, to keep up because in high school it didn't affect anything. I still graduated with a higher than 4.0, got a tennis scholarship to play collegiate tennis. And so in college it was a lot harder to use on the level that I was using and keep everything else. I couldn't juggle everything. And so then it became apparent to everyone else that something was wrong. Because I think I was probably already physically dependent before I got to college. But then it really became apparent to everybody else that there was a problem.
Yeah. And you feel like still you were not recognizing? Well, you say, I'm trying to think of when I did realize it was a problem.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know, because I guess I really I was under this impression, and maybe most people in active addiction are, where I was because I was having a good time. I also think that's another thing that nobody talks about when we talk about the dangers of substance use disorder is people there's a large portion of it that's fun in the beginning. And I think I know it's like a kid growing up in the 80s with the whole DARE program and everything. Like the impression of what I thought a drug addict looked like, I didn't fit any of that model.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, this is clearly not a problem. Like when I decide this is over, then I'll start going to class and I'll be fine. And with
Like
that,
I could stop this at any point if I
sure.
want
And that
to.
sounds so cliche, but I mean, but it's a reality of like what we have in our mind, the image that I had of like somebody who was addicted. Like, I'm like, that's not me.
Yeah.
That's because I like doing this. I'm having a good time. What's the problem?
Yeah.
And
it's like, what's the harm if it's fun or something like that?
Yeah. And it was never like, okay, yeah, I'm failing out of school because I'm not going to class.
Right.
And so that didn't even feel like, I knew I could do it. I'm like, well, I'm just not going to class, without ever making the connection that the reason why you're not going to class is because you're chasing dope all day.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. And so I don't know. I don't know that there was this aha moment for me because, I mean, I didn't want, even when I went to treatment, like the day before I went to treatment, the guy I was dating maybe I went to treatment on like a Thursday and he was supposed to get paid that day. And I begged my mom, I was like, just give me one more day. Like, he gets paid today. So I knew we were going to get high. And I'm like, just give me one more day before I go to treatment. Cause I still wanted that like last hurrah.
Yeah.
And even in treatment, I can remember thinking, well, I just won't do pills anymore. Like, I'm going to get out. I'm going to still drink. I could probably still smoke pot. But I mean, I was still just so clueless to the process or how deep in I was. And I'm like, yeah, I could probably just drink when I come out. And then, in treatment, they're like, no, you've pretty much lost your right to do anything.
Yeah.
And having that realization.
It's interesting to me because, like, as I was reading the book, and I think this was maybe just a lot of you like reflecting on that time, it's like, as I'm reading the book, like I said, it's like, oh, this moment when you went to college, it felt like you knew that it was becoming more of a problem. But I guess that's just more like a hindsight's 2020 kind of thing. So it's interesting to hear that even right before you went into treatment, you were like, no, I could. Even in treatment, be like, no, I could still drink. I could still.
Yeah. And I had those thoughts.
And I think that's like a conversation that, or like a statement even that like a lot of people don't want people that have been in active addiction to say.
Yeah.
Like I've heard a lot like, you're still an addict, every day's a struggle, that sort of like thing. But also like being honest about, it felt like a good time. You said like, I didn't think, oh, I'm that addict. You know what I mean? And I think that, we all still have these perceptions of what an addict looks like. And that's just not real anymore. Yeah. It's not real. I don't know that it ever was real, I should say.
Yeah, I don't think it ever was real. And definitely not now. And I also don't want to downplay how miserable I was. Because I'd sit here and say, I wanted one more day of getting high, but that's because I felt normal on the days that I was high. Yeah. And so that's what I chased. That's what I wanted, and there wasn't all the social anxiety and just whatever it is in me that didn't feel, I just hate the word normal, but
maybe like at peace.
Yeah, it did. It gave me peace. And that's the only time I felt it. Like all the pressures and the social anxiety and the whatever else in me that just didn't feel like it aligned, did when I was using. And so, but I was very miserable in the end. And it did very much feel like this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. Yeah. Like this is not the path I'm supposed to be on. But how do I get off of this train? Like, I just can't imagine going through a day without getting high. Like,
Yeah.
it was unfathomable to me to be able to function in the world without doing something. Like, I just could not fathom that.
Could you read this Euclid Avenue piece from the book if you don't care?
Sure. Euclid Avenue, 2003. I will give a little background here. This was one of the attempts at going to college in Lexington. When Jake picked us up, he was high already. He had been high, in fact, for days and hadn't slept in that time. I recognized the dark circles. I saw how his whole body seemed to vibrate. Despite being addicted, he was strikingly handsome, piercing blue eyes that became more pronounced as his pupils got smaller, clean cut with his square jaw freshly shaven, hanging on his conservative roots, his white undershirt fit tightly around his arms and chest. He kept himself fit. I was accustomed to searching for drugs in a new town. After a couple of unsuccessful attempts at geographical change and continuing to rack up failures after so many attempts to outrun my addiction and me, I found myself in Lexington. My boyfriend Grant and I had only been in Lexington for a few days when we heard that Jake lived here too. We knew Jake from back home, so that's when we knew we had our connection. It's always funny to me how addicts spot each other. It's like we wear signs announcing that life would be more fun if we'd all gang up in the bathroom for some blow. Every town I found myself in, I managed to see the signs, neon and flashing, no matter how hard I tried not to, leaving a path of destruction from one end of the state to the other. Jake had just sold the motorcycle, and at some point I guess he was tired of talking to himself all night. With a pocket full of motorcycle money, he decided to get us high, and that's all I needed to know. Almost immediately, his rambling, talking, and his choice of music annoyed me. Linkin Park's Numb blared from the stereo, and he had to scream over it to be heard. I was already agitated because I hadn't gotten high that day, and this made it worse. Fellow junkie friends often forget that we're not all on the same plane at any given time. Although I was not a fan of Linkin Park, I could see how he related to the song. He was always caught up in trying to follow the path of his career politician father, lines of a song that could have applied to any of us, but when he sang them, I felt the weight of his burden. We made our way out of the grid of downtown and away from the rows of student housing to Jake's upscale suburban neighborhood. Mapped out blocks with sidewalks and manicured lawns. I'm pretty sure it was his family's second home. I lived with Grant and two other people in a 2-bedroom apartment. Jake's place was tidy and well-furnished, different from the places where I'd smoked crack. He pulled out a marble-sized rock from the watch pocket of his jeans. It looked dingy and delicious. Already I dreaded the need for more, the deep, uncomfortable longing for relief, all my senses pulsing on edge. It wouldn't stop me from going down this well-traveled road. It never had, and as far as I could tell, it never would. So when desire presented itself, I fed it. They let me take the first hit from a long glass test tube-like cylinder. I'd seen these glass test tubes before by the cash register at an all-night truck stop, affectionately marked as a love rose. It was nothing more than a silk flower encased in a glass tube and offered in a rainbow of colors. At the time, I tried to imagine a trucker picking one up to take home to his wife after days on the road. But there at Jake's apartment, in the good part of Lexington, I shoved a piece of chorboy in one end to act as a screen. The key I had learned is to apply the heat slowly, letting it melt and burn at an even temperature without cracking the glass. Slowing down during the process would be more of a challenge as the night went on. I allowed the tube to fill with smoke and took a long, hard drag, holding it deep in my lungs until I was out of breath. The smoke was smooth and smelled like acetone. It reminded me of my mom and how she would remove and reapply her nail polish before going out. Immediately, my heart raced like I was in love, excited about the thought of being close to another. A lump in my throat made it hard to speak or swallow. The ringing in my ears was deafening. Their lips were moving, but I couldn't hear what they were saying. Sweat dripped down my face and my palms were clammy. I lay down because the room was going black in the corners of my eyes. I felt like I might pass out. I wasn't in this space anymore, although I could feel the cool leather of the couch on my bare legs, and I could see my reflection on the polished hardwood floors. But I was somewhere else, a place where all the pain had been taken away, and there were no more fears or insecurities. I worried it was too much and that my heart might explode. I checked the pulse in my neck and counted the beats. I wondered how many beats would signal a heart attack. We passed the tube back and forth, chasing that jolt of lightning. It was Jake's money, so it was his crack. He was in control of the frequency. But that's the problem with crack. No amount is enough, and the time between hits is too long. We paced around his suburban fortress, prolonging the trips to the Love Rose. The finishes in the house were nice, but the space was sparsely furnished. The living room was empty aside from an overstuffed couch and a huge television. I can imagine what this house would be with its 3-bedroom, 2-bath layout, a husband and wife, 2 kids, a dog in the large backyard, nights grilling on the deck that extended past the glass double doors off the kitchen. I focused on a framed photo hanging over the couch of the Lexington skyline dipped in Maker's Mark wax. At the bottom it read, "Mark of a Great Town." It was hard for me to believe. The Lexington I knew didn't seem so great. At the end of the night, the euphoria was gone. That little ball left us looking around the room for a crumb we might have dropped, pushing the Brillo pad back and forth through the glass tube in hopes of one more hit. And there it was, the thing I dreaded, the longing for something more, for something that would take me away from feeling like a failure and not living up to my potential, a break from the relentless grind of drug addiction, something that would take away those feelings of never finding a place where I belong, something that would take me to a place in my mind where I didn't care about finding someone to love me, something to fill the hole and fix me, even for a brief moment.
I know a few chapters after this, you kind of move into your, like the beginning of treatment.
Yeah.
How long before treatment did this take place? Like when you were in Lexington?
Maybe 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
What's so compelling to me as I'm reading this is there's a couple things. It's like you had the dread before you even got high about having to get high again. It was like this obvious cycle to you. And I'm just kind of like, what was the thing that really broke that cycle or made you go to treatment?
You know, I wish it were some kind of like magical thing, but it's not. Basically, a friend of mine ratted me out to my mom. Then was like, "Mandy's in bad shape, and I don't think you realize." I was living with my then boyfriend in the house that I had grew up in. It had gotten so bad. We were all 3. My mom was living there at one point too, and she got so sick of us that she left and moved and rented an apartment somewhere else and just gave me the house. And so she knew I was using. I think she just didn't know what to do with me.
Yeah.
Because I think also we have to remember that this is early 2000s. This is just, we're in the height of the whole Oxycontin wave that hit Eastern Kentucky. And I think a lot of the parents of the people I used with that were my age, that our parents didn't know what to do with us because they'd never seen anything like this. And I think that's important for context because, the environment now is that we've been in this opioid epidemic for almost 30 years at this point. And so it looks different. People's reactions are different. But at this time, our parents didn't know what in the hell to do with us.
Right.
Because this was beyond just maybe drinking and smoking a little pot. We were all full on opioid addicts.
And I don't think anyone really understood the gravity of it at that point in time.
And that essentially, this particular piece is about crack, which is just a one-off of, I pretty much did whatever I could get my hands on, but I loved Oxycontin. That was primarily what I wanted. And I don't think people realize that we were basically doing a pharmaceutical grade heroin.
Right.
Like that's basically what it was. So I want to make sure that's clear, but, a friend of mine came and I was just super dope sick, and she brought me breakfast and a pack of cigarettes and shared the pill that she had with me. And because the irony of it is she also used and she was like, "This is not good. Like you're in a whole nother level here." And so she went and told my mom and I was so mad at the time. And my mom leaves work and comes back and she was like, "All right, here are your options. After basically at that point was 9 or 10 years of this back and forth. And because she was in denial, my mom always knew, but she questioned her own instincts, and so it was a lot of push and pull back and forth. We were like 10 years deep into this. And she was like, I'm just tired. And here are your options. You can go to treatment right now, or basically you can get whatever you can fit into a garbage bag and you can leave. Like, that's your choice. Like, I'm exhausted and I don't want to deal with it anymore. And my mom always would say things and I'm like, yeah, she don't mean that. She's not going to do that to me, But there was something different this time. There was something in her voice where I was like, I think she probably is sick of me. She's sick of this. And I had tried to get into Charter Ridge at one point and couldn't. And also, for context again, not the treatment climate that we have now.
Right.
Not Kentucky being the state that has the most treatment beds of any in the U.S.
Yeah.
Which is where we are now. That's not what it looked like in 2005. And so I wasn't able to get in at Charter Ridge and just kept using. And so I was like, well, I haven't tried this and I'm tired too. So, maybe this will, okay. Yeah. And I didn't want to be homeless. I didn't want to be out wandering around, because at that point she was paying for my car. She was paying for my cell phone. She was providing the house I was living in. Without my mom, I would have been homeless.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, well, if this will get her off my back, this will give me somewhere to go, I'll go try this.
Yeah, I know you're saying like there wasn't a moment, but like I think that is the moment.
Yeah.
Like, because she gave you two choices.
Yeah, I did have a choice.
So I think it's like, I recognize it's like you were, maybe you're like, yeah, but I still want to get high one last time before I do this. But at the same time, like, you did make a choice. You were tired. You said you were tired.
Yeah, and I was. And there were always these moments through the whole thing where, like, I would be in drug dealers' houses and I would look around, and for the most part, I'm like, 19, 20 years old, and these are grown people doing this, selling dope, doing whatever. And I look around and in my mind, I'm like, I'm not supposed to be here.
Yeah. Like
this. And I don't know that anybody is, but in my 19, 20-year-old mind, I'm like, this is not what I'm supposed to do. I'm not supposed to be here. So there was something in me that always was like, you're going to do more than this. Like, your life is more than this. And I probably ignored it, because I was like, oh, but how? How do I not function without this? And I, even in that particular house where I bought a lot of my dope, and I talk about it in the book, like, they would feed me. They could tell I hadn't been eating, and they would like make me a bologna sandwich with my Oxycontin. They're taking care of me. And the wife of this guy was like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And I mean, even in that state of like, all of us are higher in hell in that environment. And they're even like, what are you doing?
Wow.
And I just, there were moments even like that.
Yeah.
That stick out now, even with some hindsight. But I mean, there were so many of us doing it.
Well, it's another interesting thing in this chapter too, that you're like, an addict can spot an addict. And as someone that grew up with, like, I had family around me that were addicts or in active addiction, and like I had friends that were in active addiction. I mean, I grew up in Eastern Kentucky. It's just like when the opioid epidemic came in, it came in and it didn't care who you were, where you came from. None of that mattered. But one thing that I always heard is like, if so-and-so could just move to this place, if so-and-so could just move to this place. And it feels like you're dispelling that, because you're like, no, that's not work. That's not going to solve this problem.
It does not work. No, because, I went to Pikeville College. That was supposed to be my fresh start. That's where I went straight out of high school. That's where I played tennis, or attempted to. And then I got suicidal for a little while. after Pikeville College, and my mom freaked my mom out. She wasn't real sure what to do with me, and so I went out to live with my Aunt Tina in Western Kentucky. Again, that was supposed to help. And I did get I had a little clean time then, like 6 months maybe, when I went out to live with her. But then I tried to go to Western in the fall. So that was like spring of 2000, I guess. So fall of 2000, because I always also thought that, like, I never imagined myself without a college education. So that was always like, what do I do if I'm not going to college? Mm-hmm. Like, I couldn't fathom anything outside of that. And so in the fall of 2000, I go to Western, and they have like this freshman orientation thing where people all get together, and, there's food, and they're orienting the freshmen to camp. And I find somebody that night and go get high with them. It's just like immediately, like I was a magnet to people who use. And so then I'm off and running again. And then I move back home, and then I try to go to Lexington to school again. And then I moved back home. There was a lot of moving around. And my mom also had that theory that if she could just get me out of Knott County.
If you're just not around the people that you're getting high with.
Well, it turns out I am the people. So
right, exactly. And I think that has shaped a lot about, like, it's changed a lot now, but like at that time in particular, it's like people had the idea of what an addict was.
Yeah.
And it was never going to be the 4.0 student or the valedictorian or something. Yes. And I think that is what's so, that's like the most, at this point, like the story has totally changed, but especially when Purdue Pharma came in and targeted this region.
Yes.
People just didn't grasp the scale of how it was happening and how quickly it was happening. And I think it's interesting that, now you're like, Kentucky has the most beds for, is it inpatient care?
Yes, treatment. Yeah,
for treatment
beds.
And it's been 30 years. I question, why did it take us that long to get to where it's like, no, addiction, like this is a disease. And I think a lot of it has to do with the manipulation from the pharmaceutical industry, of course.
Agreed.
And a lot of that denial, like you talk about your mom being in denial.
Yeah.
I think there was so much denial.
So much denial. And I can even remember, I relied heavily on a 12-step group. And it really was formidable for me. It gave me a new community, because I will say, I couldn't have, after I left treatment, I would have not successfully gone back and hung out with the same people. That is true. And I did find a new community in a 12-step group, and that was necessary for me. At the same time, my mom was trying to work through her issues, because, the addict is not the only one that's sick.
Yeah.
The whole family gets sick with this. And so, there were a lot of codependent behaviors. And so she started in with Al-Anon, which was her support group for her codependency. And she started to she tried to get one started in another community, because it was really helpful for both of us, for her to be involved in that. And some of the parents of people my age were like, yeah, we don't need that. Like, we don't really have that, what you're talking, like that, there's not a problem.
Yeah.
And she's like, really? Okay. Just still total denial. And their kids were out just wreaking havoc. Everybody in the community knew. And they were still just in denial. And which, a lot of people are, when I say I'm nervous about the book coming out, they think I'm nervous because of what's in it. And that's not really, I'm like, listen, everybody in Hyman, Kentucky knew I was getting high. Like, that's the part that kills me about people who are like, I can't believe you're going to tell all this. And I'm like, you think everybody didn't know?
Yeah.
They saw me at the Dairy Queen. They knew.
Well, it's that thing of like, you gonna go out there and talk about all your stuff?
Right, yeah.
You gonna talk about all your stuff?
Yeah. Well, and I just want people to I think we've lost our ability to be empathetic to people who are battling substance use disorder.
Yeah.
Because we're all tired at this point. I mean, it has devastated our communities, and it feels really hopeless, I think. And that, like, there's no, like, what do we do? That there's no answers. And I just want people to understand and try to be empathetic for folks who, like, what this looks like.
Yeah.
And it's kind of why I went in chronological order too, is that in a way I wanted you to grow up with me and Eric. Like, I wanted you to see the progression of these tender-hearted kids that are good. They're good kids that, you know, how they find their way into this devastating disease, and that maybe that evokes some empathy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I wanted to do.
I feel like you've got a lot going on. You wrote a book. You got a bookstore.
Yes.
And also you work for the Sycamore Fund. Can you talk a little bit about, like, what the mission is there?
Yeah. Also, I will say that I never wanted anything to do with working with people in recovery or active addiction, or, you know, lots of people who find themselves in recovery often become counselors or peer support, or, which back when I first got out of treatment, peer support wasn't even a thing. But I was like, I'm not working in this realm. I know, like, I want to do something else,
Yeah.
you know? So it's funny, you know, this year on April 27th, I celebrated 20 years in recovery. And so 20 years later, I found myself in this realm where I'm doing this work. And Sycamore is, we're a grant maker who primarily funds and supports projects that at its core keep people out of cages. That we're working to decriminalize mental illness, to decriminalize substance use disorder, and to, you know, how do we stop policing our way out of this problem? And I think a lot of people find themselves just caught up in the system, so the recidivism rates are really high. And I don't want to get this wrong, but I think if Kentucky were its own country, we would be like 7th in the world for people incarcerated. I think that's right.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. It's not worked. It won't work. And what do we do? What's our alternative? So a lot of what Sycamore does is we look to make grants to folks that are doing the work to figure out what our alternative is. Prisons are also not an economic solution, which is what happened with the downturn of the coal industry. We found ourselves with 5 or 6 prisons within 100-mile radius of where I live, and the possibility of another one being built in Letcher County, and how those are not economic drivers. You know, I think one of the first was Clay County, and Clay County is still one of the poorest counties in the country.
Yeah, I think it was the poorest.
And that prison was supposed to be the answer.
Yeah.
You know, so we need to look at how problematic that is, and there's a whole other podcast here about going into ICE detainees. And Laurel County has like 1,000-bed jail right now. Yeah. Why does Laurel County, Kentucky, need 1,000 beds? Anyway, that's a whole other podcast. But so the work that I'm doing for Sycamore is I'm out in the community and I'm looking for the ways and means to combat substance use disorder that don't involve policing. And a lot of that means just meeting people where they're at. Number one, harm reduction. But, you know, harm reduction wasn't a thing.
No,
when I got out of treatment.
Feels new age.
It is new age. and I really honestly have had to rethink a lot of the things that I thought I knew. Mm. So yeah, just, you know, understanding that when people don't have housing and people don't have food and they don't have the basic necessities, it is next to impossible for them to stop using. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't lock somebody up and then send them back to where they were living with no transportation. People who are even if if they're fortunate enough to have somewhere to go, the people in that house are probably still using, they don't have transportation, and then you expect them to get to their court date, or, they don't have an ID, but we're going to need you to get a job, and so there are all these things that keep people trapped in the cycle when really their basic needs were probably not being met in the first place, and surely not after they get out of treatment or jail. And so what does that look like? How do we change that? We've been working really closely with the hub model out of Lee County in Beattyville, the Kentucky River Health District. Started a resource hub. I won't even call it recovery hub because it serves people that are not in substance use disorder, of just, a couple of hot meals a day, hygiene kits, showers, a food bank, clothing, and harm reduction.
Yeah.
And it has been really beneficial for that community. And so we're working on replicating that model across the state, and it's working. Governor Beshear is behind it. He has recognized the benefits. The Kentucky Opioid Abatement Commission also is using some of the abatement funds to replicate this model in other parts of the state, with the idea that every county has a resource hub. So you have somewhere to go that you can get help with getting these basic needs met and be met with compassion.
It feels like the conversation has shifted, because for a long time, I feel like the conversation was like trying to get people to realize that this is a disease. Addiction is a disease that needs to be treated. And also, like, Purdue Pharma is responsible for, especially in this region, for targeting this region, and told lots of lies about OxyContin, and targeted this region specifically to create what happened, essentially, like people being dependent on their drug.
Yeah.
And I feel like, now they're paying for it. Not really, but you know what I mean. There's a settlement.
There's a settlement.
And I think now it's like, okay, now how do we get to do good with this money? That's been my fear ever since the settlement sort of started getting paid out, is like, okay, now what are we going to do with this?
Yeah, it's valid. It's a valid fear.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I'm fortunate. Like, that's pretty much, I'm like, okay, I'm going to make this my mission.
Yeah.
Is that I'm going to work closely with the Opioid Abatement Commission on the state level. And I think I have their ear and their respect, because the Sycamore Fund, up until this point, has been funded by private foundations for the most part. It's not like I have an angle when I go to the Opioid Abatement Commission, because we haven't asked them for any funding yet. I'm just kind of like a neutral party there to be like, hey, this is what I'm seeing on the ground in Eastern Kentucky, because we have, there are guidelines laid out, because this is a settlement.
Yeah.
There are guidelines for how this money has to be spent. And policing, enforcement is one of the buckets of work that is not allowed. Like, you're not allowed. It's treatment, prevention, and I can't remember the third, but enforcement is not a part of it. So this money can't be used to buy cop cars or drug dogs or like that. That's not going to get us anywhere, has not gotten us anywhere.
Yeah.
And so, just kind of making sure that the funds are being spent the way they're supposed to. And also making sure that there are people in the room helping make that decision with lived experience. Because that's the huge part for me. Nothing about us without us.
Yeah.
Like that's the phrase that we use, and trying to empower those voices that are early on in recovery. Because it's easy for me with 20 years. I've got 20 years of working on me, 20 years of experience without using. I feel not 100% confident, but I do feel like I have a voice and can go into this opioid abatement committee hearing in Frankfort. Somebody that's a couple years in recovery may not have found that voice yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to empower other people in recovery to be like, hey, this is our money. This is blood money. And we should be the ones deciding where this goes. People who are still in active addiction should be deciding where this money goes. And that's hard. That's still a hard place for people to get to, being like, we're going to invite people who are actively using to this table to say, where do we spend this money? It's a hard place for people to get to, but and it's fulfilling work for me.
Yeah.
Like I'm okay now with doing the work in this realm. Whereas, 20 years ago I didn't want to. But I'm grateful to be able to do it, and yes, feel like a watchdog for the opioid abatement funds basically at this point. Cause
well, I mean, I was going to say, like, they do need, like, those are the people that they need to be the loudest in the room.
Yeah.
Are people with this lived experience or actively in this experience, because we see it all the time. We see people that could not even imagine this sort of thing happening to them are making the rules.
Yeah.
All the time. And, I do think there is truth to, there is not one person that I personally know that hasn't been touched by addiction, especially in this region.
Yeah.
And I'd say that's the majority of the people in America is like, it's the same.
Yeah, at this point.
It's also so different because, like, going through treatment, going through the system, being arrested, things like this, not everybody's experiencing that, and they don't know how unuseful things like that are,
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of people in their mind, it's like, well, if you have, like, over the weekend you're in jail and you sober up, like, why are you not okay after that?
Well, and there's a I haven't been able to go through one, but a lot of the folks I work with, there's a reentry simulation. So basically it's a simulator where you're put in this scenario of like, okay, you've just spent 30 days in the county jail, and here's what you have now, survive.
Yeah.
Basically. And people get really frustrated in that process because of the roadblocks. They're like, oh yeah, well, you don't have your social security card, so you can't do this. And then you're like, well, I can't get a ride to get my social security card, or I don't have the money, and then it's just like roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And you realize at some point where the frustration would come in, where somebody's just like, hell with it.
Oh yeah.
I'm getting high again.
Yeah. Because these systems of support outside of, rehab, it's just like, I've always heard people talk about you go through rehab, you do the 30-day program, and then after that it's like, okay, now what's your support system?
Yeah, because it is so necessary. And I think a place that we're at is we also don't know what to do with people in long-term recovery, because we are the first ones in long-term recovery as far as from, not to say that AA and NA haven't been around forever, but to come out of this Oxycontin era, it's the folks that are my age who were teenagers during that are like, okay, I think a lot of times my clean time is taken for granted. And I think people just assume, you're like, oh, well, you got 20 years. Like, there's a lot of times that my clean date will go by with no fanfare. Not that that's necessary. Like, I don't need pats on the back, but it's important for me to remember and acknowledge and know where I can go back. It's different. Like when I had a year clean with the cake and the celebration and all the things, and nowadays it can kind of just go on past and nobody really acknowledges it. But I think what people don't understand is that really, for me, I'm going to speak for me, people in longer term recovery, the risk is probably higher because I was so desperate and so done that I was just so hungry in the beginning to want a different way of life and to not go back to it. And I think this is how I know that it's a disease, is like your mind will talk to you after all these points of like, well, I was 25 when I got clean, and I'm 44 now. Surely I could have a beer and not go off the rails, that type of thinking that creeps in after long term. And those are not things that you deal with early on. And so I think, figuring out what it looks like for people in long-term recovery too. Not just the people getting them into treatment. That is, like you said, that might be 30 days of this journey.
Yeah.
Treatment is just the beginning of sustainability.
It sounds like you have an idea for your next book.
Right.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, maybe. I hope there's a next book.
What do you, this is my last question. What do you, actually, I do have one more question.
Yeah.
The title, The Nature of Pain, like, what is that in reference to?
One, there's a lot of pain in this. There's the pain from grief. There's emotional pain. There's physical pain. There's the pain that, that you deal with when you're using. But the particular phrase, the nature of pain, comes from Richard Sackler's speech when he announced OxyContin. He said, "We're going to change the nature of pain." Mm. And boy, did they.
Yeah.
So that's where that comes from.
What do you hope people get out of reading this book?
So I hope they get a better understanding of, I've heard everything from, well, you made a decision. This is your fault. You made a decision to get high. I hope this gives people, like I said, empathy, obviously. I want them to see what a journey looks like from the inside. Because I don't know. I haven't seen it from an addict's perspective. Beth Macy does a beautiful job in Dope Sick from a journalist point of view. And there are others. Hers is not the only one, but I hadn't really seen it from the inside. And so I hope this gives some context to what it looked like growing up during that time period and having something just come out of nowhere that was everywhere, that really gave us no room. We were kids, and just got caught up in something that could have been deadly, was life-altering, could have been life-destroying. And I just hope people can see what the journey looks like. And then maybe they'll look different at people. Somebody that's still in active addiction, they'll see past what they're using to cope and maybe see the traumas or the path that they used to get there. That the using's just a symptom of something bigger.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
for talking to me about this book. And thanks for letting me get to read it early. And I'm glad that you wrote it. I'm really glad that you wrote it. Thank you so much to Mandi for coming on to talk with me again. You can pick up her memoir, The Nature of Pain, at any bookseller, but I highly recommend purchasing it from bookshop.org or Red Spotted Newt bookstore in Hazard, Kentucky, which Mandi actually owns. You can find the Red Spotted Newt online at readspottednewt.com. Big thank you to Kentucky Foundation for Women for helping fund Mountain Laurel's Women of Appalachia. This podcast is produced and edited by me, Jessica Miles. Our artwork is created by Hayden Miles, and our theme music is produced by Kenny and Hayden Miles. If you'd like to support the show, you can find me on Substack at mountainlaurels.substack.com. You can also follow the show on Instagram and Blue Sky. I'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Talk soon.